I was on Twitter and I had saw Breonna Taylor's name was trending number one on Twitter, and of course, it piqued my interest, and I was curious about what that was about, and it led me to this particular story here. Now, I know I mentioned Breonna Taylor, but in this picture, neither of these people that you see are Breonna Taylor, but their stories are very similar to hers. But luckily for them, no one was killed. So in this picture, you see two people by the name of Mario Daugherty and his girlfriend, whose name is Ashley, I think LeBray or Lachey. I forgot what her last name is, but I do know that her first name is Ashley. And back in 2018, they too had an incident where they had a no-knock raid come to their doorstep and then eventually into their house. Now, what makes the stories very similar is because the ones that were involved with Breonna Taylor were also involved with them. So these terrorists have a history of doing that. Now, of course, if you look at this couple, it is almost very similar to that of Breonna Taylor and Kenneth Walker. I don't have to go into complete detail of why that is, but I'm gonna go ahead and read this article. It's fairly short. That is coming from the Daily Beast, released on August 25th, 2020. At least 5 of the Louisville, Kentucky cops involved in the no-knock search warrant that ended with Breonna Taylor's death were involved in another botched drug raid in 2018. So you have another similarity, quote unquote, drug involvement. Now, what I found to be very interesting is that they said there were 5 cops here, but I could have sworn when it came to Breonna Taylor, it was only 3. So that means that there are 2 more terrorists whose names we don't know about. Shoot, we barely know about the 3 that they kept talking about for the little bit of time that they did talk about them. 4 terrorists. The search warrant claimed marijuana was being grown and sold in the house, but the case was later dropped. Now look at that. The case later dropped, which means there were charges that were brought up. Now, they probably were charges brought up against him, much like it was with Kenneth Walker when they brought up charges against him for a quote unquote attempted murder when all he was doing was protecting himself. Let me see. Daugherty's 14-year-old daughter thought she was being robbed and ran out into an alley where she was arrested by terrorists with guns drawn. The traumatizing raid resulted in no charges and is the subject of a lawsuit. So they brought up a case against him like they did with Kenneth Walker, and also like Breonna Taylor's situation, no charges were brought up against the terrorists again at that time, just like it wasn't brought up again. I don't know when that jigaboon Daniel J. Cameron got into his position, but you got to think this was only 2 years ago. So I don't know when he got into his position, but I would not be surprised if he was the attorney general during that time as well. And speaking of the jigaboon, I actually found out that during the RNC, he was one of the speakers, and he had the nerve to actually talk about Breonna Taylor as if he was going to do anything, and he didn't. At least he had the balls, to my knowledge, to admit that he didn't have any plans of filing any charges against him. I mean, well, thank you for, letting us know, because we already knew he wasn't going to do it anyway, whether you mentioned it or not. It says, when the same terrorists raided Taylor's home, her boyfriend thought they were being burglarized and used his legal gun to fire a warning shot. It prompted cops to return with a volley of gunfire that killed Taylor in her sleep. The drug dealer that police were looking for had been found earlier that night. So as you can see, they have a history of doing this. They did it with this couple right here, and they said it resulted in their 14-year-old daughter being arrested because they thought she was involved. They brought up a case against him. They dropped it. Then they brought up charges, they tried to bring up charges against the terrorists, and there were no charges filed. Fast forward 2 years, same thing happens in the same style with Breonna Taylor and Kenneth Walker. They bring up charges, but the thing is, they actually get charges to stick to him, because this time he was firing back, and they throw him in jail for like 2 weeks until Judge Olu Stevens, and thank God for him, ended up getting those charges dropped. But guess who didn't have any charges filed against them? The same exact pigs that were involved with this incident right here. But they keep them on the street. They keep them on the street. So now what I'm worried about is, what if they go and do this again? And who's to say that it wasn't another case before this one that they did that we don't know about yet? And like I said, they probably are going to allow them to do this again. See, you got to be careful with these politicians that you put into office. Just because they're black, like that Daniel J. Cameron, doesn't mean they are for you. They only go with whoever lines their pockets. And we can tell who's doing that. So they are probably proud they have a Daniel J. Cameron out there. And remember what Breonna Taylor's mother has said. They are doing some kind of development, quote unquote, out there, aka gentrification. So I'm not sure where this couple was located. I'm just going to say that maybe they were in the same area. I wonder if they knew Breonna Taylor. So they're probably was trying to get them up out of there. The tactics that they will use and the lengths that they will go are boundless. But I'm glad that nothing happened to this family, or nothing happened to their daughter at the end of the day. But it's still nerve-wracking that it did happen. I know it traumatized them, and I know like I said, it traumatized their daughter. She was only 14 at the time when this occurred. I don't think any child should have to go through something like that, or experience something of that caliber. And again, they went back with drugs, which was the same thing. Like, I'm telling you, reading this is almost like reading the Breonna Taylor situation from top to bottom and everywhere in between.